let's talk fiscally, let's talk economics just for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
I am not a Marxist. I mean, my brother is, and so I'm not a Marxist. But I also am not what's happening now in this country. In other words, I have a different feeling, which is I believe in small business. I believe that the backbone of this country should be small business. Anything that's big should be owned by the people, or the community, not by private interests. I'm against absentee landlords. That's one of my biggest bugaboos. I write about it. I think there should be a law that you should only you can only rent to someone if you live in the house with them, as a tenant. There should be no absentee landlords. The community should own the property and rent it to the people at for nonprofit at a lower. Anyway, but here's my question to you: why is it, do you think, that so many working class Americans, okay, and poor Americans, but why do they accept the fact that there are people earning so much money in this country and paying at a tax? Now, how many people do you know, Danny, that even realize that 1960 the top federal tax bracket was 90%? Okay, and when Reagan took office, it was like he knocked it down to 71. So it was 78. He knocked it down to 78 and then 71 when Reagan was in. Now it's 39. 39% is the top bracket. Top bracket. That's not what you pay. That's where you start. So why is it, do you think, that so many Americans, our neighbors and friends, why do they accept the fact that this system should continue in this manner with this obscene wealth?
I think a big part of it, and there's so many reasons why, some would look at it from the perspective of, well, the U.S. ruling class has really embedded this idea into people's head that, they can really become rich too if they follow this narrow individualistic path. I think it's a little simplistic. I think that's not the entire story, but it is definitely part of it. I honestly think, I am a socialist. I would consider myself a Marxist, but I think that one of the biggest reasons why, so many people kind of accept this is because there once was an actual burgeoning struggle between capitalism and socialism. There was once that burgeoning struggle around the world that actually influenced U.S. policy from the economy to the military during the whole Cold War period, from the beginning of the Soviet Union all the way up until its fall. And I think ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, ever since China started to open up to the market, ever since, one by one, the capitalist sphere of the world began to expand and the socialists began to contract, what we've seen is, over that same period, the same process kind of occurring in the United States, where the radical and revolutionary left was suppressed, where a lot of the bases, the conditions that allowed it to kind of gain traction, right? The Black Panther Party did really well because there was this big anti-war movement going on. The draft was happening. There wasn't this black leadership class so entrenched in local and state and, municipal and federal politics. So there was these conditions that existed that allowed for a revolutionary ideology like socialism or whatever to actually form. Now, post-1991, but even before that, post-1975 onward, what we've seen is this conservatization of the entire society, because not only have the conditions become so suffocating economically, militarily, we're talking about this empire, it's only expanded more and more as conditions in the United States have gone worse and worse, and labor unions are being reduced to nothing, and if they are around, they're attached to the Democratic Party. We have this level of disorganization that I don't think has been experienced prior, and because people in the United States have such a short memory, mostly due to the fact that our education and media systems are completely committed to giving us disinformation about just about anything, but especially about politics, history, war, and what have you. we have this condition where a lot of people are just going to go on with their lives until
But here's the question,
carry that frustration.
Danny,
we see this, yeah.
But here's the question. All right, so let's take healthcare. So let's say that you're talking to someone that doesn't have the greatest healthcare. Maybe they're lucky and they have a policy, but when they have a $3,000, $5,000 deductible, you know what I'm saying? They don't have a great plan. Yeah. Now, and you go to that person, which I have, and I'm talking to that working stiff person who works for a living, and I say, who's the insurer you have? And he says United Healthcare. I said, do you know that like 3 years ago? Well, I said this when it was when it was happening, but now. Do you know that the CEO of United Healthcare made $65 million last year? And it's like, they go, oh yeah, really? But it's like there's no, you know what I'm saying? There's no light that goes off. Like that's bullshit. Why would that's not right? You know what I'm saying? There's none of that, Danny. There's none of that indignation of these people making so much wealth, where it definitely affects them. It affects them. The health coverage. The health insurance company he has, the policy is so bad, and yet the CEO of that company is making $65 million. And why? Why is it that so many working Americans they don't care? They just accept everything.
I think that there was this during the big expansion of neoliberalism and the post-Soviet period of 1991, Francis Fukuyama coming out with the thesis of there is no alternative, the end of history. That narrative has been very effective in a way to kind of insulate the people of the United States from understanding any alternatives to the way things are. And so if the way things are, consist of the continuing deterioration of wages and working conditions in the United States, unemployment, privatization of education, student debt, all these things. If that becomes normalized and there is no alternative, there's no movement strong enough to articulate an alternative to that, then yes, a lot of people are going to kind of, I don't know, suffer in silence or.
So what's happening? What's happening, Danny? What's happening is because we're living under a two-party system. What's happening? What you're really saying, even though you're not saying it, is people who would never support the right wingers. The really crazy right wingers, the Republicans or Trump. All right, the regular people like my wife and people that really care and they're nice people. So they continue to vote Democrat only because they want to keep the wolf from the door, the right-wing Republican wolf. But and when you tell a lot of these people, but the Democrats, they're not doing anything about this, about that, about this, about that, about this, about that. Yeah, well, what choice do you have?
Exactly.
That's what they tell you. What other choice do we have?
Right. You prevent the wolf and you settle for the fox. But as I've written in prior pieces, as Malcolm X said, right, the fox is becoming the wolf, or has become the wolf, and maybe even more scary than the wolf in a lot of ways, because the fox is able to get away with something worse.
To end this wonderful interview, tell me in a couple of minutes if you were planning to have a movement in this country. Tell me how you would want to see it play out.
Well, I think that there is a wonderful example actually in Philadelphia right now. It's the Saturday Free School run by Dr. Anthony Montero and many good and very political people in the North Philadelphia area have started with, I think what needs to happen is political education. I think it's one of the reasons why I write is because while the material conditions continue to deteriorate, a lot of our conversation has been kind of lamenting over and trying to figure out why. Why is the movement so far behind the actual conditions that we are looking at? And I think looking at the Empire is a great place to begin because the U.S. military state has never been bigger. We're talking about 1,000 military bases around the world. We're talking about a military budget that dwarfs the next 7 biggest military budgets. We're talking about the biggest military state that has ever existed, and that is causing the most suffering that has ever been caused, given the technology and the sheer weight that the U.S. military state is able to impose on peoples abroad. So we have a great place to start, because things are, in fact, stagnating or getting worse for the majority of working people in this country. And, what the growing unemployed and, the struggle against racism is only going to heat up as, the finance capitalists and the bankers and the monopoly capitalists, are in a runaway train trying to preserve their profiteering. And so I think it has to start with political education. It has to start with being in our communities and being willing, as people begin to shake off this stupor and realize, and have basically the Democratic Party slap them in the face every day with the election of Tom Perez and the DNC, to Sanders kind of rebuking. It's becoming apparent, and I think that's going to matter, and it's going to really continue to affect people. I think the Democratic Party is actually on it's on death's doors. So we have an opportunity right now to talk about alternatives.
Well, we could disagree on that. We could disagree on that, because and again, not that I don't agree with the Democratic Party, but as a handicapper, as a horse racing handicapper, I think the opposite effect is going to happen because of what we said earlier. But I think what I wanted to say to you, it's funny because the title of our show here, the radio show, is "It's the Empire Stupid." So you're right on, and that's why I wanted you on as a guest, because you understand that that's where the focus has to be when we're educating our fellow neighbors and friends. It's the empire, and the good news, Danny, is we have an ally, which my brother, the Marxist, doesn't want to talk about. But when we have an ally to be opposed to this military empire, and that's the libertarians. Now, we might not agree with the libertarians on anything else, but they're the ones that agree with us on the civil liberties angle and on the empire and on the militarization. They are totally against it, So there is a chance for more and more people to if people could focus on that and forget about political parties right now, forget about all the other issues which you know about and you talk about, and we should focus on this empire, this military-industrial empire, and I think that is the key. So I agree with you on that.
Great. Yeah, no, it's unfortunate that he doesn't agree that we can't build unity in some aspects with, I think, anyone. I was even arguing for a while with my friend Don DeBar that it's well worth engaging the question of war with anyone who will fight with you on it, because it is that urgent, especially when, we will be in the coming years confronting a broader war with Russia and China. That is the only place U.S. imperialism can go at this point, and we have to take it seriously. So we have to have these conversations, and it's not like we have to be in 100% agreement with everyone we talk to, but we have to have a program. And if that program speaks to forces that we don't normally agree with, but we can align with on the question of war, then let's do it. So I have a different kind of perspective on, building unity among our class and among the oppressed here in this country.
Right, and also, Danny, when you talk about the empire, and if people do want to talk about economics or about financial, I mean, to me, it's spiritually criminal. How's that? Spiritually criminal that there are people. No, really, that there are people earning so much wealth, income, wealth, whatever you want to call it, and money off of other people. Do any of these Christians actually read the Sermon on the Mount and see what the man talked about? I mean, it's so ridiculous. Right, anyway, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we could talk for 10 hours. I just want you to tell everybody: is there a website you want people to go to, or Just anything you want to say about yourself, about your writing, just go ahead.
Sure. So you can reach my writing every week at blackagendareport.com. You can also go to the letter A,